The message arrived on a cold Tuesday morning, and it changed everything. Taiho was sitting in his small laboratory on the space station called Everbloom when his computer made a sound he had never heard before. It was not the normal beep of an email or the soft ping of a colleague saying hello. This was something different. Something important. He put down his coffee and looked at the screen. The symbol glowing there made his heart stop for a moment. It was the royal seal of the Villani Empire. In all his years of working as a scientist who studied alien biology, Taiho had never received a message from them. The Villani were proud. They were ancient. They ruled over 1,000 star systems and had done so for 10,000 years. They did not speak to humans unless they absolutely had to. Taiho opened the message with shaking hands. The words were formal and cold. They requested his presence on Villania Prime, the home world of the Empire. They offered payment that was more money than Taiho would earn in 10 lifetimes. But they did not explain why they wanted him. The message simply said that his expertise was needed for a matter of great importance. Taiho was a xenobiologist. He studied how different alien species worked on the inside. His special area of research was something most aliens found boring or even disgusting. He studied how to make different species work together, how to make their cells talk to each other, how to bridge the gaps that evolution had created between worlds. Most aliens thought this was a waste of time. Why would a Villani ever need to understand a human? Why would any of the great and powerful races lower themselves to study the biology of others? But Taiho believed that understanding was always valuable. And now, it seemed, someone else believed it too. He took the long journey to Villania Prime. It required 3 separate ship transfers and took nearly 2 weeks. When he finally arrived, he understood why the Villani were so proud. Their world was beautiful beyond words. The cities were made of crystal that caught the light of their twin suns and threw rainbows across the sky. The air smelled sweet, like flowers that Taiho could not name. Everything was clean and perfect and old. A guard met him at the landing platform. The guard was tall, with silver skin that seemed to glow from within. His eyes were a deep purple color, and they looked at Taiho the way someone might look at an insect that had wandered into their home. Not with hatred, but with a kind of confused disgust. Taiho was used to this. Humans were new to the galaxy. They had only been traveling between stars for about 200 years. 2 species like the Villani who had been building empires when humans were still living in caves. Earth's people were children, loud, messy, short-lived children who somehow kept spreading across the galaxy like weeds. The guard led him through the Crystal Palace without speaking. They walked for what felt like hours, through halls that were taller than any building on Earth, past windows that looked out over gardens filled with plants that moved and sang. Finally, they reached a door made of something that looked like frozen light. The door opened. Taiho stepped inside. The room was a medical chamber, but unlike any he had seen before. The equipment was elegant and beautiful, more like art than science. And in the center of the room, sitting on a chair that looked like a throne, was the most beautiful being Taiho had ever seen. Princess Leora looked at him with eyes the color of violet stars. Her skin was silver, like all Villani, but hers seemed to shine brighter. Her hair was long and white, falling around her shoulders like water. She was tall and thin with features that were almost human but not quite. She was perfect in the way that a statue is perfect. And she was looking at Taiho like he was something she had found on the bottom of her shoe, so she said, and her voice was like music, even when it was filled with disappointment. "This is the human scientist." An older Villani stepped forward. His silver skin had faded to gray in places, and his movements were slower than the others. But his eyes were sharp and full of power. This was Emperor Kale, ruler of 1,000 worlds, father of Princess Leora. "Thank you for coming," the Emperor said. His voice was tired. "I will be direct with you, human. My daughter is the last of our royal bloodline. She must have children, or our family will end. Our dynasty will crumble. Everything we have built for 10,000 years will fall apart." Taiho nodded slowly. "I understand, but I am confused, Your Majesty. The Villani have the most advanced medical technology in the galaxy. Why do you need me?" The Emperor's face twisted with something that looked like pain. "Because we have tried everything. Every doctor, every scientist, every treatment known to our people. Nothing works. My daughter's body rejects all attempts at conception. Her cells will not cooperate. She is." He paused, and Tai-Ho saw the grief in his ancient eyes. "She is broken." "I am not broken," Leora said sharply. Her violet eyes flashed with anger. "I am simply different, incompatible. The doctors say my biology has become too refined, too pure. There is nothing left for new life to hold on to." Tai-Ho listened carefully. He was beginning to understand. The Villani had spent thousands of years making their bloodline more and more pure. They had removed anything they saw as weakness or imperfection. They had made themselves perfect. And in doing so, they had made themselves unable to create new life. "I have heard of your work," the Emperor continued. "You study how to make different species work together, how to bridge biological gaps. I do not pretend to understand it. Frankly, I find the entire concept distasteful, but I am desperate human. I am offering you everything I have. Save my daughter. Save my empire. Give us an heir." Tai-Ho looked at Princess Leora. She stared back at him with those beautiful, cold eyes. She did not believe in him. She had been poked and prodded and examined by hundreds of doctors. She had been told she was broken so many times that she had started to believe it. She looked at Tai-Ho and saw another failure waiting to happen, but Tai-Ho saw something else. He saw a puzzle. He saw a challenge. And he saw, buried deep beneath the cold pride, a woman who was very, very scared. "I will need complete access to all previous research," Tai-Ho said. "I will need to run my own tests. And I will need time." "If one galactic cycle," the Emperor said. 6 of your Earth months. After that, the noble houses will demand that the succession pass to another family. My enemies will tear this empire apart, fighting over the pieces." Tai-Ho took a deep breath. 6 months to solve a problem that the greatest minds in the galaxy had failed to solve. 6 months to save an empire. 6 months to prove that humans were more than just loud, messy children. He looked at Princess Leora and smiled. "But then I should probably get started," he said. The first week was the hardest. Tai-Ho spent every waking hour reading through the medical files that the Villani had given him. There were thousands of them. Reports from doctors who had examined Princess Leora since she was a child. Test results. Treatment attempts. Failure after failure, documented in cold clinical language. The Villani doctors had tried everything they knew. They'd used genetic modification. They had used cellular reconstruction. They had even tried ancient methods that were more like magic than science. Nothing had worked. Leora's reproductive cells simply refused to accept new genetic material. They were too pure, too refined, too perfect to allow anything new inside. Tai-Ho read the reports until his eyes burned. He drank cup after cup of the strange Villani tea that tasted like honey and starlight. And slowly, he began to see something that the other doctors had missed. They had all been trying to fix Leora. They saw her as broken, as damaged, as something that needed to be repaired. Every treatment had been designed to change her, to make her work the way she was supposed to work. But what if she was not broken at all? What if she was exactly what the Villani had made her to be? Tai-Ho put down the files and did something that none of the other doctors had done. He started to study the Villani themselves. He went to their libraries, which were vast and ancient, filled with records that went back thousands of years. He learned about their history. He learned how they had once been a diverse species with many different bloodlines and genetic variations. He learned how they had slowly, over many generations, bred themselves to be pure. They had removed the genes they saw as weak. They had enhanced the genes they saw as strong. They had made themselves beautiful and powerful and long-lived. And in doing so, they had created a species that was running out of genetic diversity. They were too similar to each other. Their cells had forgotten how to accept anything new. Leora was not broken. She was the final result of 10,000 years of trying to achieve perfection. And perfection, it turned out, was sterile. Taiho requested a meeting with the princess. He expected her to refuse. She had made it very clear that she thought he was wasting her time. But to his surprise, she agreed. They met in the palace gardens, surrounded by flowers that sang softly in the evening breeze. Leora sat on a bench made of crystal, her silver skin glowing in the light of the setting suns. She looked tired. She looked older than she had when Taiho first met her. "Well," she asked, "have you found a way to fix me yet?" "I have a question," Taiho said. He sat down across from her, uninvited. A guard stepped forward, but Leora waved him back. "What do you want, princess?" "Not what your father wants. Not what your empire wants. What do you want?" Leora stared at him. No one had ever asked her that question before. Her whole life had been about duty, about the bloodline, about the empire. No one had ever cared what she actually wanted. "I want to matter," she said finally. Her voice was soft, and for the first time, Taiho heard the real person behind the royal mask. "I want to be more than a vessel for the next generation. I want to be remembered for something other than my failure." Taiho nodded. "Then help me," he said. "Stop being a patient and become a partner. Help me understand your people. Help me find a solution that we have not tried yet." For a long moment, Leora said nothing. Then, slowly, she smiled. It was a small smile, barely there, but it was real. "You are a very strange human," she said. "You do not treat me like a princess. I treat you like a person," Taiho replied. "Is that not better?" From that day forward, things changed. Leora began visiting Taiho's laboratory. At first, she just watched. She sat in the corner and observed as he ran tests and analyzed data. But slowly, she started to ask questions. And then she started to help. She told him things that were not in the medical files. She told him about her childhood, about the treatment she had undergone, about the pressure she had felt from the moment she was born. She told him about the fear that kept her awake at night, the fear that she was the end of her family, the last page in a 10,000-year-old book. Taiho listened to everything. And as he listened, he began to form a new theory. He called his colleague Hannah back on Earth. She was a geneticist, one of the best in human space. He told her about his research, about the Villani, about the problem he was trying to solve. She listened carefully and promised to send him everything she had on human cellular adaptation. When the data arrived, Taiho spent 3 days without sleep, analyzing it. And finally, he found what he was looking for. The Villani reproductive cells needed something to jumpstart the process. A catalyst. A protein that had once existed in their genetic code, but had been bred out generations ago. Without it, their cells could not begin the process of creating new life. They were like engines without fuel. And here was the amazing thing. Humans still had that protein. It was common in human biology. Humans had never tried to make themselves pure or perfect, so they had kept all the messy, complicated pieces that other species had thrown away. The solution was not to fix Leora. The solution was to give her something human. Taiho brought Leora to the laboratory and showed her his findings. He explained everything in simple terms, drawing diagrams on the glowing screens that filled the room. He showed her how human cells could produce the catalyst that her cells were missing. He showed her how it could be synthesized, combined with Villani technology, and used to restart the process that had stopped. "You were saying," Leora said slowly, "that humans have something that we bred out of ourselves?" "Yes," Taiho replied. "You tried to become perfect. But perfection is static. It does not grow or change. Humans are messy. We are imperfect. But that imperfection is also our strength. We adapt. We change. We find ways to survive that other species never consider." Leora was quiet for a long time. She looked at the data on the screens. She looked at Taiho, and then she laughed. It was a real laugh, full of surprise and something that might have been joy. "All my life," she said, "I was taught that humans were inferior, short-lived, primitive. And now you are telling me that the key to saving my bloodline has been inside your species all along?" "Life is full of surprises," Taiho said with a small smile. Leora looked at him with new eyes. For the first time, she did not see a short-lived primitive. She saw a scientist, a problem solver, a friend. "And let us surprise everyone," she said. The news spread through the palace like fire through dry grass. The human scientist had found a solution. He believed he could help Princess Leora have children. But there was a catch. The treatment would require using human biological material, human proteins, human cells. Human genes would become part of the royal bloodline. The reaction was immediate and violent, Lord. Drevin was the first to speak against it. He was a tall Villani with silver skin that had turned cold gray and eyes that held no warmth at all. He was the leader of the noble houses, the powerful families who had always stood just below the royal family. For years he had watched and waited, knowing that if Leora failed to produce an heir, the throne would pass to another family, perhaps even to his own. "This is an insult to everything we are," Lord Drevin said at the emergency council meeting. His voice echoed through the great hall where hundreds of Villani nobles had gathered. "For 10,000 years, we have kept our blood pure. We have removed the weaknesses that other species carry. We have made ourselves perfect. And now this human wants to pollute our royal line with his primitive genetics?" Many of the nobles shouted in agreement. They pounded their fists on the crystal tables. They called for Tai-Ho to be sent away, or worse. Emperor Kale sat on his throne and listened to the shouting. His old face was tired. His eyes moved from Drevin to Tai-Ho to his daughter, who stood beside the human scientist with her chin held high. "The ancient laws are clear," Drevin continued. "Contamination of the bloodline is forbidden. It has been forbidden since the founding of our empire. Even if this treatment works, the resulting child would not be a true Villani. It would be a hybrid, a monster. Is that what you want for your grandchildren, Your Majesty? Half-breeds sitting on the throne of Villania?" Leora stepped forward. Her violet eyes were blazing. "I would rather have half-breed children than no children at all," she said. "I would rather see our empire survive and change than watch it die pure and proud." "You speak like a human," Drevin sneered. "Perhaps you have spent too much time with this scientist." "I speak like someone who wants to live," Leora shot back. "I speak like someone who has been told her whole life that she is broken, only to discover that she is not broken at all. We broke ourselves, Lord Drevin. Our ancestors bred out the very thing we need to survive. And now, a human is offering to give it back to us." The hall fell silent. No one had ever heard the princess speak this way. She had always been quiet, dutiful, accepting of her fate. This fire was new. This passion was new. Tai-Ho watched her with a mixture of admiration and concern. He knew that speaking this way was dangerous. The noble houses held great power. If they united against the royal family, the consequences could be severe. Emperor Kale finally raised his hand for silence. "I have heard both sides," he said slowly. "I need time to think. The council will meet again in 7 days to make a final decision." The meeting ended, but the battle had just begun. Over the next few days, Lord Drevin worked tirelessly against Tai-Ho and Leora. He spoke to every noble house. He reminded them of the ancient laws. He warned them that allowing human contamination would weaken the entire Villani species. He painted pictures of a future where Villani children were born impure. Where the great empire crumbled because of one desperate decision, Tai-Ho continued his work. Trying to ignore the growing hostility around him, guards now followed him everywhere. Servants refused to bring him food. He found hateful messages written on his laboratory walls. The Villani, who had once simply ignored him, now looked at him with open disgust. One night, Anna called him from Earth. Her face on the screen was worried. "I have heard what is happening," she said. "Maybe you should come home. This is not worth dying for." "It might be," Tai-Ho replied quietly. "These people need help, and I might be the only one who can give it to them." The attack came 3 days before the council meeting. Tai-Ho was alone in his laboratory, running the final calculations for the treatment. He heard a sound behind him and turned just in time to see 3 figures in black entering. Through a door that should have been locked. They moved fast, faster than any human could move. They had weapons that glowed with deadly energy, Taiho ran. He was not a fighter. He was a scientist. But he was also human, and humans had survived by knowing when to flee. He ducked under a table as energy beams burned the air where his head had been. He grabbed a container of chemicals and threw it at the nearest attacker, creating a cloud of smoke. He crawled through the chaos, heading for the emergency exit. But they were faster. One of them caught him, grabbing his arm with fingers that felt like steel. Taiho cried out in pain as he was thrown against the wall. "Human filth," the attacker said, raising his weapon. "You should have stayed on your own world." Taiho closed his eyes, waiting for the end. The end did not come. There was a flash of light, scream, and then silence. Taiho opened his eyes to see Hannah standing in the doorway, holding a weapon she had taken from a fallen attacker. Her face was pale, but determined. She had arrived just in time. "I decided to come help in person," she said, her voice shaking. "I guess that was a good decision." They looked around the laboratory. It was destroyed. The computers were smashed. The samples were scattered. Months of work had been wiped out in minutes. Taiho fell to his knees. For a moment, he wanted to give up. He wanted to go home, back to Earth, back to his small, quiet life where no one was trying to kill him. But then he thought of Leora. He thought of the hope he had seen in her eyes when he showed her his research. He thought of the courage it had taken for her to speak up against Lord Dreven. He thought of an empire full of people who did not know they were dying, slowly breeding themselves out of existence. Hannah knelt beside him. "The research?" she asked. Taiho tapped his head. "Here," he said. "They can destroy my computers, but they cannot destroy my memory. I remember everything." Hannah stared at him for a moment, then laughed. It was a tired, relieved laugh. "You humans are something else," she said, even though she was human too. "Yes," Taiho said, standing up on shaky legs. "We are. That is kind of the whole point." He looked at the ruins of his laboratory and made a decision. The council meeting was in 3 days. He had 3 days to rebuild everything. 3 days to prove that humans did not give up, even when everything seemed lost. "Humans do not survive by being the strongest," he said, more to himself than to Hannah. "We survive by refusing to accept that anything is impossible." He started picking up the pieces. The next 3 days were a blur of desperate work. Taiho set up a new laboratory in a hidden section of the palace. Princess Leora had found it for him. It was an old storage room, forgotten for centuries, filled with dust and broken equipment. But it had walls, a door that could be locked, and most importantly, it was a place where Lord Dreven's spies would not think to look. Leora helped him clean it. She, the princess of 1,000 star systems, got down on her knees and swept the floor. She carried equipment in her royal hands. She worked beside Taiho and Hannah like she had been doing this all her life. "I never knew work could feel like this," she said on the second night, her silver skin covered in dust. "I never knew it could feel so good." "There is something special about building things with your own hands," Taiho replied. He was connecting wires in a computer he had rebuilt from broken parts. "Humans learned that a long time ago. It is one of our few advantages over species like yours." Leora smiled. It was becoming easier for her to smile now. "Tell me about Earth," she said. "Tell me about your home." So Taiho told her while they worked. He told her about the blue skies and the green forests. He told her about the cities full of noise and life. He told her about the oceans that covered most of the planet and the creatures that lived in them. He told her about human history, full of war and suffering, but also full of art and music and love. "We are not a perfect species," he admitted. "We fight each other. We make terrible mistakes. Sometimes I think we are barely surviving our own nature, but we keep going. We keep trying. We never give up, even when giving up would be easier." Leora listened to every word. She was beginning to understand something that her teachers had never taught her. The Villani had spent 10,000 years trying to eliminate weakness. But weakness, it turned out, was not always a bad thing. Weakness made you struggle. Struggle made you grow. And growth was what life was all about. On the morning of the 3rd day, the research was complete. Taiho stared at the data on the screen, hardly daring to believe it. The treatment was ready, but it was different from what he had originally planned. It was better. He called Leora and Hannah over and explained what he had discovered. The original plan was to synthesize the catalyst from human cells and inject it into your system, he told Leora, but that would only be a temporary solution. Your body would eventually reject it. We would have to keep giving you treatments for the rest of your life. And now, Leora asked. Heiho pointed to a new diagram on the screen. The Villani have something that humans do not have. Your crystal resonance technology. It is not just decoration. It is part of your biology. Your cells respond to certain frequencies of light and energy. I realized that we could use that. He explained how Villani crystal technology could be combined with human stem cells to create something entirely new. Not a temporary injection, but a permanent change. The treatment would reprogram Leora's reproductive cells, teaching them to produce the catalyst on their own. The resulting cells will not be purely Villani, Taiho said carefully. But they will not be human either. They will be something new. Something that combines the best of both our species. Leora was quiet for a long moment. Hannah held her breath. Something new, Leora repeated softly. Something better. There are risks, Taiho warned. We have never done anything like this before. If it fails, your system could shut down. You could die. Leora looked at him with those violet eyes that had once been so cold but now burned with fire. I have been dying my whole life, she said. Dying slowly, watching my family's legacy crumble around me. At least this way, I have a chance. At least this way, I am fighting. The treatment was administered that evening in the hidden laboratory with only Taiho, Hannah, and a few loyal servants present. Emperor Kale came to watch. He was too old and too proud to help, but he stood in the corner and watched with tears in his ancient eyes as his daughter lay. Down on the treatment table, the process took hours. Crystals glowed around Leora's body, singing frequencies that human ears could barely hear. Machines hummed and clicked. Data scrolled across screens. Taiho monitored everything, adjusting the settings, never looking away for a moment. When it was over, Leora closed her eyes and fell into a deep sleep. Now we wait, Taiho said. The council meeting was the next morning. Emperor Kale attended, even though his daughter was still sleeping. He told the nobles that a treatment had been attempted, but he did not know if it had worked. He asked for patience. Lord Drevin demanded to know what kind of treatment. He demanded to see the human scientist. He demanded answers. You will have answers, the Emperor said calmly. When there are answers to give, 3 days passed. Leora did not wake up. Taiho stayed by her side, monitoring her vital signs, watching for any change. Hannah brought him food that he barely touched. Emperor Kalea came to visit every few hours, his old face drawn with worry. On the 4th day, Lord Drevin came to the palace with an army of guards from the noble houses. The time for waiting is over, he declared. The princess is dead, or dying. The human has killed her with his experiments. I demand that he be arrested and executed. The palace guards blocked the door. The emperor stood firm. But everyone could see that his strength was fading. He was an old man who might be watching his dynasty end. And then, a sound, a soft voice, coming from the room where Leora lay. Everyone turned. The door opened. And Princess Leora walked out, moving slowly but surely, her silver skin glowing brighter than anyone had ever seen. I am not dead, she said. Her voice was strong. Her eyes were clear. And my cells are no longer rejecting new life. Taiho followed her out, holding a medical scanner. His face was shining with exhausted joy. The treatment worked, he said. Her reproductive system has been restored. She can have children. For a moment, the hall was completely silent. Then Emperor Kale did something no one had ever seen him do. He fell to his knees and wept with joy. The servants began to cheer. Even some of the nobles looked relieved, happy, amazed. Lord Drevin stood frozen, his plans crumbling around him. Leora walked over to Taiho and took his hand. It was a simple gesture, but everyone saw it. Everyone understood what it meant. You did it, she whispered. We did it, Taiho corrected her. Together. The miracle had happened. The impossible had become possible. A human scientist and an alien princess had combined their worlds and created something new, and the galaxy would never be the same. Lord Drevin did not accept defeat quietly. On the night after Leora's recovery, he gathered his loyal nobles in a secret meeting in the outer districts of the capital city. They were angry. They were afraid. Everything they had planned for, everything they had worked toward, was slipping away. The Emperor is weak, Drevin told them, his gray face twisted with fury. He has allowed a human to corrupt the royal bloodline. He has thrown away 10,000 years of tradition. The people do not know it yet, but this is the beginning of the end for the Villani. We must act now, before it is too late. His plan was simple, but deadly. He would lead his guards into the palace at dawn. He would arrest the Emperor on charges of betraying the ancient laws. He would have Leora declared unfit to rule because of her corrupted biology. And he would take the throne for himself to save the Empire from human pollution. But Lord Drevin had made a mistake. He had spent so many years looking down on everyone else that he had stopped paying attention to the people around him. He did not notice the young servant girl who stood in the shadows listening to every word. He did not see her slip away and run through the night streets to the palace. Her name was Yuna, and she had grown up in the palace serving the royal family since she was a child. She loved Princess Leora like a sister, and she was not going to let Lord Drevin destroy everything. When Drevin's forces arrived at the palace at dawn, found the gates locked and the walls lined with guards, Emperor Kale stood on the balcony above, looking stronger than he had in years. Beside him stood Leora Taiho and Hannah, and behind them stood thousands of ordinary Villani citizens who had come to the palace in the night, answering a call that had spread through the city. Like wildfire, the miracle of Princess Leora's recovery had become the biggest story in the Empire. Everyone knew that a human scientist had done what Villani doctors could not. Everyone knew that the princess had chosen to accept human help, even though it meant changing herself. And many of them, more than Lord Drevin had imagined, thought that was a good thing. Lord Drevin, the Emperor called out, his voice strong and clear, "You stand accused of treason against the throne. You attempted to murder our guest, the scientist Taiho. You plotted to overthrow the legitimate government of the Villani Empire. How do you answer these charges?" Drevin looked at the crowds. He looked at the guards. He looked at the faces of his fellow nobles, many of whom were quietly backing away from him. He saw that he had lost. "The ancient laws are on my side," he said desperately. "The blood must remain pure. This is what our ancestors taught us." Leora stepped forward. The morning light caught her silver skin and made it blaze. "Our ancestors taught us many things," she said. "They taught us pride. They taught us strength. But they also taught us fear. They were so afraid of weakness that they bred it out of us. And in doing so, they nearly killed us all." She raised her hand, and the crowd fell silent. "Stand before you as the last of the royal bloodline. I have been told my whole life that I was broken, that I could not fulfill my duty, that I had failed my family and my people. But I was not broken. I was a victim of our own pride. We made ourselves so perfect that we could no longer create new life." She pointed at Taiho. "This human saved me. He could have failed. He could have given up. Lord Drevin destroyed his laboratory and tried to have him killed. But he rebuilt everything from memory. He refused to accept that the problem was unsolvable. He refused to give up on me, even when I had given up on myself." She turned back to the crowd. "Humans live short lives. They are not as strong as us. They are not as advanced as us. But they have something we lost a long time ago. They have hope. They have the ability to face impossible situations and keep fighting anyway. They call it stubbornness. They call it determination. They call it being human." She paused, letting her words sink in. "I say we learn from them. I say we open our doors to other species. I say we stop trying to be perfect and start trying to survive. The old laws served us for 10,000 years, but they are killing us now. It is time for new laws. Better laws. Laws that bring us together instead of keeping us apart. The crowd erupted in cheering. Lord Drevin tried to speak, but his voice was lost in the noise. His guards looked at each other, then slowly put down their weapons. There would be no battle today. Drevin was arrested and taken away to face judgment. The other nobles who had supported him were given a choice: accept the new way or leave the empire forever. Most of them chose to stay. They were proud, but they were not stupid. They could see which way the wind was blowing in the weeks that followed. Emperor Kale announced sweeping changes to Villani law. The ancient rules about genetic purity were abolished. Trade agreements were signed with Earth and other human worlds. Villani scientists began working alongside human researchers, combining their knowledge for the first time in history, and Taiho was offered the position of Royal Science Advisor. It was a great honor, one that no human had ever received before. But Taiho hesitated. "I am not sure I belong here," he told Leora one evening, as they walked in the palace gardens. "I am still just a human. I still do not really understand your people." Leora smiled at him. Her smile was warm now, full of life and hope. "You understand us better than we understand ourselves," she said. "You saw what we could not see. You fixed what we could not fix. And you never stopped believing in us, even when we did not believe in you." She took his hand. Her silver fingers wrapped around his brown ones. "Stay," she said. "Not just as an advisor. Stay as my partner, my friend, my equal." Taiho looked at her. He thought about Earth, about his small laboratory, about the quiet life he had left behind. Then he looked at Leora, at this impossible woman who had changed so much in so little time. "I will stay," he said. 2 years later, Princess Leora gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl. Their skin was a soft gray, lighter than pure Villani, but darker than human. Their eyes were violet, like their mother's, but with flecks of brown, like their father's. They were beautiful. They were new. They were the first of a new generation. The news spread across the galaxy. On 1,000 worlds, people heard the story of the princess who could not have children, and the human who changed everything. They heard about hope and determination, and the power of refusing to give up. And on Earth, in cities and villages, in schools and homes, humans smiled when they heard the news. They had always known they were special. They had always believed that they had something to offer the galaxy now. The rest of the universe was beginning to understand. The story became a legend. Parents told it to their children. Teachers taught it in schools. It was translated into 100 languages and spread to the farthest reaches of known space. And at the heart of the legend was a simple truth. When the mightiest empire in the galaxy faced extinction, it was not their ancient technology or superior genetics that saved them. It was a single human who refused to accept that anything was impossible. That was the human way, and it changed the universe forever.